Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be sharing my August wrap-up discussing all the books I read in August. Alright guys, so I'm actually filming this a little more than a week before the end of August. I'm about to go on vacation. I'm not going to have time to film. So I ended up reading over 20 books, I think around 25 books. They were all romance. Some were good. Some were really bad. August was just all over the place in terms of reading. So I'm excited to talk about these books with you guys. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about all the books I read in August. Alright guys, so I typically sort my wrap-ups by genre, but since I purely read romance this month, I'm going to do it by reading order. And I do plan on reading more fantasy romance and fantasy in September. There are some books I'm very much looking forward to. But for this wrap-up, the first series I started was the Blood Alliance series. I read the first 4 books, and this is by Lexi C. Foss. This series is so dark, but so good. So the premise of the story is if vampires and lichens took over the human population, and now humans are really seen as blood bags and are used for breeding, and they're very second-class citizens, and we're following all of these different vampire and human couples and then lichen and human couples, and it's really good. Definitely check trigger warnings. This series was so much darker than I was expecting, and it really gets darker as you go, but oh my goodness, I'm loving it. So like I said, I am on the 4th book. The 3rd book is my absolute favorite. That is this one, Regally Bitten, Werewolves, and it's like a throuple situation, and I'm obsessed. So anyway, highly recommend if you want a good paranormal romance. And then next up, I read the first 2 books in the Tattered and Torn series by Cowles. So Jess from Peace Love Books has been raving about this series, so I wanted to give it a shot. It is a small town romance, and I feel like I am someone that just doesn't love small town romances. I enjoy them while I'm reading them, but they're never really stand out to me. And I actually saw someone say on a live show that they read small town romances as palate cleansers in between darker or heavier books. And I agree with that. I think that's a good way to go into it. But the first book I did really enjoy, and it started completely different than I was expecting. So it's following this girl, and she's living with her family off the grid. It's almost like a cult. They don't do anything involving the government. They don't go into town, and they're just very suspicious of outsiders. And then her father ends up kidnapping this girl and bringing her to this cult area. And then our main character, when she's only 11 years old, goes into town and says, hey, my father has kidnapped this girl. I think she's dying. You have to come help her. And that's really how it starts. And I just wasn't expecting something so dark to be the opening of a small town romance. And I did really enjoy the first one. The romance wasn't a very strong component of the book, or at least I felt it wasn't. And then the second book, I just wasn't a huge fan of. It's Brother's Best Friend. But I think if you are someone who really appreciates small town romances, I would give the Tattered and Torn series a try. All right, and then next up, I went down a reverse harem rabbit hole. I read more reverse harems this month than I've read my entire life, and I'm not mad about it, but there's a lot. So it started with the St. View Prison series, and the first book is Locked Up Liars. I devoured this 3-book series in 2 days. It is glorious. It is following this girl, and she goes to a bar with her sister, and then they end up seeing the sister's ex-boyfriend, and the sister's like, I want nothing to do with him. She leaves. So the two strike up a conversation, and the main girl brings the ex-boyfriend back to the house. And then they kind of fool around. She wakes up and she sees the ex-boyfriend next to her sister's dead body. So she freaks out, calls the cops. Cops come, arrest him, and then she starts feeling regret because she's like, I honestly don't think he could have done this. I feel like I falsely accused him. Yes, it seems like he probably killed her, but also I know him down in my heart. He's not a murderer. So she goes off and she's trying to prove that he did not kill her sister. So she hires a lawyer, and it's just so much drama. So this ends up being a reverse harem relationship between a civilian, a criminal, a prison guard, and the lawyer, and it's just so much fun. So this is probably one of my absolute favorite reverse harems. Definitely check it out. I really, really enjoyed it. And then I read The Dancer and the Masks by Paige. So another reverse harem, but way darker than the previous one I just mentioned. This is following a girl, and she's able to kind of see the future, and she keeps seeing these men in masks, like, kidnapping her and taking her. So one day when she goes downstairs, there's a bunch of people in masks, and they kidnap her, and she's not very surprised. She kind of saw it coming. And it turns out they end up taking her to this, like, isolated Gothic tower in the middle of Scotland, and there are all of these numbers there, and these numbers are beautiful women who have also been kidnapped, who are very proficient in a certain skill. So there's one that plays the piano, there's one that's good at, like, knife throwing and things of that nature, and they end up all forming this reverse harem relationship. So definitely not what I was expecting. I still have to read the second book. I started it and then ended up putting it down. I wasn't in, like, that mood. But I think if you want a very dark reverse harem, definitely check out The Dancer in the Masks. And then next up, I read Malice and Wrath by Coralee June. So this is a dark mafia reverse harem, and I absolutely loved it. So it is following Juliet, and she is best friends with this mafia princess named Vicky. And there are some rules to their friendship. Juliet can never ask Vicky any personal questions. They always meet where Juliet works in secret, and they're just very, very private. So one day, Vicky tells Juliet that she is going to be leaving, and then something happens which causes Vicky's brother, Malice, to enter the establishment. And Juliet ends up fighting with Malice, something happens, and now Juliet gets sucked into their world. So this is a reverse harem relationship between Juliet and Malice, the king of this, like, mafia underground, and then William, his brother, and then Anthony, his other brother. And I love this duet. It's actually not a duet. There's 3 books. I haven't read the third one yet. But the first 2 books I read, I really enjoyed. I love Juliet as a character. So she actually hosts, like, true crime podcasts, and she's obsessed with death. And this reverse harem is a little bit different than other ones I've read because the boys don't actually like to share. And it was really funny seeing these guys all kind of, like, fight over Juliet, and Juliet being like, I'm not going to deal with this. So I just love Juliet as a character. And once again, these books, very dark. Specifically the second one, there's something that happens towards the end of the second book that was very disturbing, but I really enjoyed it. So if you want a dark mafia reverse harem, check out Malice and Wrath. All right, and the next book I read, Perfect Strangers, and this is by J.T. Geissinger. Unfortunately, I was not a fan of this book. So I thought while I was reading it, I was going to end up rating it either a 4 or 5 star read. And then by the very end, it dropped down to 1 star. I was just not a fan of the last epilogue. I think it changed everything about the book. And I can't really even get into the book without giving away spoilers. So if you want to have a conversation about it, like, let me know in the comments, and I'll, like, DM you. But I was not a fan of this book at all, which is a shame. I will be reading more from this author. I know Pen Pal is coming out soon, or it was just released. A lot of people are really loving that. So we'll see. But unfortunately, Perfect Strangers just was not for me. And next up, I read one of my absolute favorite books of August, and that is The Silent Waters by Brittainy C. Cherry. So this is actually the first book I've ever read by Brittainy C. Cherry, and it will not be my last. This book was so emotional, and I can't believe how short it is because I feel like so much happens in this book. It is a childhood friends to lovers. We are following Maggie and Brooks, and Maggie has always had a huge crush on her brother's best friend. And then one day when Maggie is 10 years old, something very traumatic happens to her and she stops speaking. So this is really about Brooks and Maggie healing together. And also it really shows that how something happening to one person in the family can affect the family as a whole. And it was just such an emotional story, and I absolutely loved it. And I highly recommend. I cannot wait to read the rest of the books in this Element series. I'm assuming like one's fire, one's earth, those type of elements. I could be totally wrong. But I really love this. And the cover of this book is absolutely stunning. I don't know if it's going to pick up on camera, but it's probably one of the prettiest books I own. So yeah, if you want a very emotional read, I highly recommend picking this book up. All right, and then next up I listened to Dear Aaron by Mariana Zapata. So I actually had the audio version of this book for a while, but I kept putting off listening to it because I saw so many mixed reviews. And I am so happy I listened to this via audio because I would not have been able to get through this book physically. It is following this girl, Ruby, who ends up being a pen pal to this guy, Aaron, who is deployed. So the first half of this book, maybe even more than half, are just letters going back and forth, and they're just doing like day-to-day things. Like Ruby's talking about her job, she's talking about knitting, talking about going to the store, and then Erin's talking about like showering and everything that's going on with deployment. And it's great to show that like these two have this connection and have built up this pen pal relationship over time, so that way when they do meet, like, we kind of do have butterflies with them first meeting and everything like that, but it was a lot. So I think this is the first Mariana Zapata book I rated under 4 stars. I think I gave it 3.5, really just because the pacing was so slow, and then the end felt so rushed, so we really don't see the couple together as a couple for a very long time, and I really wish that was like expanded upon a little bit more. But overall, it was still a very cute story, just not one of my favorite Mariana Zapata books. All right, and then next up I read Meet Me Halfway, and this is by Lillian T. James. So I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on this book. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and I really enjoyed it. It is following a single mother. It is a slow burn, grumpy sunshine romance, and our main character had her son at the age of 16, and now she is doing absolutely everything to try to provide for him independently. So she's working 3 jobs, she's going to school, and she's facing a lot of backlash from like the other mothers in her son's school because she had her child so young. And she just needs a break, and then she's also dealing with her ex-husband who is doing some very not okay things to her. She's dealing with SA at work, and it's just, she's dealing with a lot. And then she has this grumpy neighbor living next door who just keeps complaining about her and is brooding, and then they eventually form a relationship, and it's great. So highly recommend. I really, really enjoyed this book, and like I said, not a lot of people are talking about it, so definitely I would give this a shot if you want a grumpy sunshine slow burn romance. All right, and then next up, I read this book, So Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. I feel like everyone on Bookstagram and BookTube has already talked about this book, so I'll keep this very brief. This is following Sawyer, and she is a girl on the run. She steals identities, and she is just trying to get by in life. So she ends up sleeping with this guy Enzo, steals his identity, Enzo finds out, and is not happy about it. So he tracks her down, some things happen, and they end up on this island together. It's completely deserted besides this lighthouse, and they end up having to stay there until a boat's gonna come to rescue them. Now, when they get into this lighthouse, they find out that there's actually a man living there, and he is very peculiar, and he ends up putting these rules on them where they can't leave their rooms after 9 o'clock and like all of this crazy stuff. So this is very much like a horror, thriller, romance. It's a lot of things, definitely more horror towards the end of the book. It is very steamy. H.D. Carlton also wrote The Cat and Mouse Duet, which I've talked about a lot on this channel. I absolutely loved Haunting Adeline. It's one of my favorite books. Hunting Adeline, I did really enjoy. A little too dark for me. This feels very similar in terms of writing. However, I feel like the romance of this book wasn't quite as strong as The Cat and Mouse Duet. I just really didn't buy the romance. I will say, I'm probably one of the only people. I liked the shark scene. If you know, you know. I thought it was cool. Anyway, I did end up liking this. I think I ended up rating it 3.5 stars. So if you like H.D. Carlton's writing and you want like a thriller romance, I would definitely give this a shot. All right, and then next up I read Garnet Flats, which is the 3rd book in the Eden series by Devney Perry. So this is following Talia, and when Talia is in college, she is madly in love with this guy named Foster, who is an MMA fighter. And then one day she feels completely betrayed when she finds out that Foster has married her best friend. So then 7 years go by, and Foster shows up at the town that Talia is currently living in and tries to win her back. So this is a second chance romance, and I really enjoyed it. So I didn't think I was gonna love the whole MMA fighter like vibe, but I thought it was really cool. And I will say I wasn't as emotionally connected to this couple as I was with Juniper Hill, the 2nd book in the Eden series. That one is still definitely my favorite, just because of Knox. But this was still really good. So highly recommend. If you are enjoying the Eden series, I would definitely read the 3rd book. All right, so next up I read Medicine Man by Saffron A. Kent. And I have some conflicting feelings. So this is following a girl that ends up being sent to a psychiatric hospital after she attempted self-harm. And I believe she's only there for like 21 days. And there ends up being a new doctor that starts, and it is Simon Blackwell. And he is this very attractive younger doctor. And right away, our main character has a bit of a crush on him. And we have the point of view of both Simon and our main character. And she is very immature. And she even says that she has impulse issues. So like going into this, she just feels super young. So there already is a significant age gap between Simon and our main character. Also, he's in a position of authority over her, and like their scenes together, they end up sleeping together pretty soon after like meeting, and it just didn't feel great. So I'm normally very okay with age gap romances. Like some of my absolute favorite romances are age gap. I've even read some guidance counselor romances that I'm okay with. The Michaela Smeltzer, Sweet Dandelion, fine with that. This one, for some reason, and I still can't really figure out why, just felt a little creepy. So I didn't end up loving this as much as I was hoping to. There were some cute moments of like them kind of helping to heal each other, but overall, I wasn't a huge fan. All right, and then next up I read the most hyped and talked about book on Bookstagram and BookTube, and that is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. So I have a full spoiler-free blog I will leave in the cards and in the description, but this is following Magnolia Parks and BJ Ballantyne, and they just have the most messy, toxic, but emotional relationship like known to man. So this entire book is just these two people pining after each other, but also Beach just absolutely loving Magnolia, but not knowing how to communicate with her. So he hurts her, and then she hurts him, and there's fake dating, and there's angst, and I will say the writing in this, at first I wasn't a huge fan, but it is very lyrical, and it's very easy just to feel the emotions of these characters. I think the author did an amazing job describing heartbreak and like seeing the person that you love doing something with someone else and just how like shattering that makes you feel. So I did really enjoy this. I do have the second book. I will continue with the series. Just know going into this, there is very little plot. This is very much a character-driven story about two people that love each other but can't be together because of their own actions. So just know that going in. But it was a very good time, and I'm very happy that I read it. All right, and the next 3 books I read as part of a reading vlog. So I collabed with the Love Librarian, and we both picked new-to-me authors to read for each other. So she picked Chloe Liese, and I am so happy she did because I read the first 3 books in the Bergman Brothers series, and now I'm obsessed. So this series follows 7 Swedish-American siblings, and it features, every single book is like a different trope, but they also have different disability rep, which I love. So I think all of the books can be read as standalones. This was one of my favorites, Always Only You, and it's following Frankie and Soren. And Frankie is the social media director for this hockey team that Soren, one of the Bergman brothers, is on. And Soren has always had like this huge crush on Frankie, and he's just like a cinnamon roll character. But then Frankie actually has RA, and she's on the autism spectrum. So I just love to see that representation in books, and I cried so many times while reading this book. I just think the author did such a phenomenal job describing this, and I actually didn't realize the author herself is on the autism spectrum, so it's her own voice, and I love that. So that is just so cool. So highly recommend, if you have not read the Bergman Brothers series, definitely check it out. I cannot wait to read the next 2 books. I know one is MM, and I think the other one might be Fake Dating. So we will see, but definitely check this out if you want like a rom-com, but also very emotional read. And last up, I read The Truth About Heartbreak by B. Celeste. So this is actually the first book I've read by this author, and I really enjoyed it. It is a brother's best friend romance, and we're following River, and she has grown up in the foster care system, and she has just had such a traumatic and terrible life. So then she's adopted by like the sweetest people on the planet, and they're pretty wealthy, and she now has an older stepbrother named Ollie, and he really looks out for her, and then Ollie has a best friend named Everett. So River has always kind of had this connection to Everett, but Everett is much older, and also it's her brother's best friend, so he doesn't want anything to really do with her romantically, even though they have this connection. So Everett ends up dating this other girl, and they end up going to college together, and they get very serious, and then something happens between Everett and River, and the story kind of goes from there, and I really enjoyed this. I will say the pacing was a little bit slow in the middle, but overall, I really loved Everett and River's story. I will say, I have started the second book in this series. I will leave it on the screen. I forget the name. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about it. So the second book is actually like an uncle niece romance, but like they're not actually blood related. And there is quite a significant age gap. So we'll see how that goes. But the first book I really, really enjoyed. So highly recommend if you want a brother's best friend romance. Alright guys, those are all the books I read in August. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of the books I mentioned. Now, I said this already, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!